So a little bit about Placed, high level. We have a opt-in panel of 100,000 users that we measure 1,000 locations per day. So we see about 100 million locations on a daily basis from our user base. So the user goes in, installs an application, allows us to measure their location data. We run it through a set of models, and we predict where they went in the physical world. There's no survey. There's no push notification. It's all about the inference model that occurs. So to give you an idea, our vision is kind of focused in around quantifying the physical world. And what I'll do is talk about the challenges that exist in location that we've run into, the opportunities that exist to clean up that data set, and then the actionable insights. So you've got companies like Arbitron, Quantified Radio. They've built out a panel of anywhere from 100 to 250,000. You've got Nielsen. They've got television, and they're the rating service that's quantified how people buy media today on TV. You've got ComScore for digital. But the physical world has no rating service. And the reason why they don't have a rating service is it hasn't been possible to actually quantify what people do on a persistent basis outside of the use of surveys or using inferred data like credit card purchases to say you were here. But that misses out on a lot of data points like cash purchases when you go to a quick serve restaurant. So here, physical world, just in case anybody forgets, 90% of retail transactions happen there. So location analytics today has traditionally been around surveys, asking people, where did you go in the last 7 days? Where did you go in the last 30 days? Did you enjoy your experience there? And they do that through email, online, call centers. What's changing with that is the ability to actually dive into very detailed information. So here what you're looking at is New York City, based on 3-hour increments, where people are going, not from traffic, but actually visiting businesses. So sitting down, shopping, walking around, eating at a restaurant. So you can start to see this movement actually occur in the physical world. So this really gives you the ability to move beyond just asking a question, but actually looking at the data directly and saying, where were they? You can also go in and start to look at the overall ecosystem of where do people go in the physical world. So here I can dive into department stores, see what does the department store market share look like. Let me look at Walmart. Click on a button and actually understand what does Walmart look like. I can dive in and see what is their market share, what does the competition look like in that space. And all this data has been available for web, and that's because it's been able to be directly measured. With the physical world, with smartphones, with big data, which is a word that people don't like, but you can actually leverage that, you can start to see this type of data set that hasn't been available before. So here, this is where people who go to Walmart go. They're more likely to go compared to the US population. So you see gas stations, truck stops, where they least likely to go, Duane Reade, Whole Foods, Nordstrom's, Trader Joe's. So all of a sudden, I've just picked a single point in terms of where people visit, and I've seen the change in behavior. And I can start to see that trickle down 2, 3, 4 points down the path. And the macro trends that allow us to do that is, one, smartphone. So this is a computer in your pocket. It's got GPS, sensor values. It can process data. And the battery life is starting to get better that you can do more and more on that device. The adoption of apps. So there's mobile web, and then there's apps. Mobile web lets you do limited things versus applications actually are installed on the device that you can start to pull in information like sensor, phone, what locations have they been to. And then big data and cloud. So we process in excess of 16 billion locations on a daily basis because we look at the historical activity of all of our users. So we're constantly running our models, and we're able to do that for the low 5 figures. So when I used to work at Faircast, where we did airfare predictions, we had to build out a data center that cost $5 million just to build out data centers across the US to support people searching for different airline ticket prices and then storing that data and running models against it. So what does location data look like? Is it, hey, it's as simple as I see these location data points for one user, and it looks like they maybe went to 3, 4, 5 places because I see the cluster of locations. What this actually represents is a single visit to Costco. So you're walking around the aisles, and you're generating all of this location data, and there's a lot of noise. So if I actually took this previous data set here and took this as face value and said, with a single location, I'm going to say that this person was there, I'm going to get wrong insights. So I'm actually going to figure out that, you know what, they actually weren't there, but the person maybe incorrectly responded, maybe they lied when they filled out a survey, and now all of a sudden I have a false positive rate. I can tell you one of our clients previously had a 95% false positive rate because they had a mall store location, and they geofenced it around 300 meters, and what they ran into was false positives, where 95% of the respondents didn't go into the store, and they were questioning even the other 5% in terms of did they actually go into the store or did they want the incentive. So another example of how location data can be inaccurate. This is me in our office on Foursquare, Facebook, and Google. Each one of these places actually has different locations where I'm at. It shows the little dot moving around. It shows different businesses where it thinks I should check into. So these are companies with billions of check-ins, yet if you only have a single latitude and longitude to work with, you're going to get bad data. And so how do we get clean data? How do we actually get 1,000 locations per user per day without running into privacy issues? So we're explicitly clear in what we do. And this is very important on the app side as you start to measure the data. We actually go beyond what is required by law. So we actually have a triple opt-in. So the first opt-in is when you go into the app, the App Store requires permissions. So this app requires these types of permissions. Let's see here. These types of permissions. So you say yes. Then we actually call out right when you open up the app. This app is used to measure location data as well as device data. Do you agree to move forward? We see a 30% drop-off rate here. But we're OK with that because we know the people that we get after that point are going to be very clean. So we can do a lot more with that data set. And going back to the types of apps that we have, we've got 2 owned and operated. So one is around, a panel app right here on the left-hand side, about 600,000 downloads to date. And what that app does, feel free to download it. You just install it, measures where you go, and you get points, and then you can redeem those points for cash, prizes, et cetera. And then we wanted to go after a different audience because there was a little bit of a bias. It was a little bit younger, it was a little bit less affluent, a little bit education was a little bit lower. So we said, how do we go after a broader audience? So we actually introduced an app called Give to Charity. So that actually went after a different audience where we said, hey, here's a way that you can give back to a charity of your choice, one of 7. Just install the app, pick the charity, and we'll start to donate as long as you keep the app on. So it's a little bit of the gamification in terms of, hey, it's saying your data is very valuable, and let's do a clear value exchange. And then so from a location standpoint, this is me walking to a coffee shop, generating a lot of locations. The way that our models work is we look for a cluster of locations. And this is important because if you start to work with location, it's very important to understand where you're sourcing the data from. Is it from an ad network? Is it from an individual app? Does the app have to be open? Is it based on check-ins? We actually did a study early on where we looked at where people checked in. And if you normalize that to represent the US population, about 90% of the time, every single person in the US would either be at a bar or a restaurant all the time. So that tells you there's a little bit of bias in the data. So now you see the cluster here. And then we look at what are the places around you. And then we assign a probabilistic model to say, what is the probability that you're at any given business? Again, this is all done in the background, so there's no check-in. And then so an example of why it's important to use multiple data sets. So here's a cluster of locations. Here's 2 businesses. So it's a coffee shop and a toy store. They're pretty equally distanced. So let's say it's a 50-50 probability that I'm at one of those businesses. And it's not great. So rather than just looking at location, I can go out and say, we license data from multiple place databases, and I can see that it's Tuesday at 9 o'clock, and I know the popularity of the businesses, and the coffee shop's actually more popular. So the location moves a little bit closer to the coffee shop, so almost like a gravitational pull. Then I look at other place databases. So there are many place databases out there. They're very cheap to license the data set, and they have different properties. So one might say, hey, this is the center of the building. The other might say, this is the entrance of the building. This is the back of the building. But as you start to take all of those points together, it actually allows you to get a better picture, an outline of that building. So here, if the coffee shop has additional points around latitude and longitude, again, the location moves a little bit closer. And then we look at their historical activity. So we look at their place history. Did they ever go to a toy store? The answer is no. We put that location even closer to the actual coffee shop. And the way that we validate the data set is we do have a game function. So what happens is as you have the app installed, we will push out a set of questions the next day. 4 of those questions will be our highest probability questions. 2 of those will be fake answers to catch those liars. And the liar rate's about anywhere from 5 to 10% from what we see. And then we actually give them points as they respond to those questions. So this was in mid-March. We had about 3.5 million validations. It's actually closer to 5 million now. So we're constantly training the data, leveraging big data to clean up that data set. So what can I do with this data? So this is Hurricane Sandy. We looked at everyone in our panel that was in New York or New Jersey in the month of October. We normalized that data set to 1. And then we looked for changes in that period of time. And we said, you know what, our data looks kind of funky here because why is it spiking up in early October? And we're based out of Seattle. So we're like, okay, maybe our data is wrong. Maybe the sample size is too small. What actually happened there was it's Columbus Day weekend. So we don't celebrate that on the West Coast, but in the East Coast, it's actually a 3-day holiday in a lot of areas. So people are going to hotels 3.5 times more likely. So we're like, okay, our data is actually pretty good. So let's see what happens next. So here what I'm looking at is the minute the hurricane hit, you can actually see it. The hurricane news hit, you see that spike up. The blue line represents grocery stores, green gas stations, yellow hotels and motels. So you see, let's see if this works. There we go. You can see here, about 6 days before the hurricane hit, there was a run on gas stations. So you see about a 3x increase in foot traffic to gas stations. Then you go back and you see 2 days later, you actually see almost a 4x increase in a run to grocery stores. And then last, you see a day before the hurricane hit, people are going to hotels. So this starts to give you insights in terms of how do I actually plan around different types of events. Not always a natural disaster. You can start to look at Super Bowl. What's occurring? What can I learn from a previous market to understand what's going to happen next? Black Friday. So we have got a number of clients that work in the hedge fund industry. So Black Friday, we looked at our panel data set. And we said, hey, who's going to win Black Friday last November? And we saw American Eagle had a 5x increase in foot traffic. And we're like, okay, this is interesting. None of us shop at American Eagle again, but we're like, all right, this is good. Then we looked at the analyst reports 2 days later, and they said, hey, American Eagle actually was one of the winners of Black Friday. And the way they did this was they hired 4 analysts. They went to 4 different malls in the U.S., and all day in the mall, they just counted shopping bags. Like, that's how they actually figured out who was winning on Black Friday. And then the nice thing that validated the data after that was American Eagle actually raised their earnings estimates and said we had the best Black Friday ever. So again, using location data, it actually gives you the ability to look at the overall ecosystem and understand, is it just me where something is happening, or is something happening elsewhere where my competitor is doing better? So from an Abercrombie & Fitch standpoint, they actually didn't see this type of gain, and their stock actually got hit later in the quarter. So we work with a number of different companies, and we pitch a lot of companies as well. So here, one of the questions was for a high-end retailer, we don't do well with millennials. We know they come in a store. We've done studies. We've seen the 14 to 24-year-old female come into our store, but they're not buying anything. Our sales aren't matching up with the foot traffic. So what's going on? So we looked at our panel data set. We sliced the data and said females 14 to 24 that had been to this high-end retailer, where are they going? At the top of the list is Old Navy, Ross, Payless Shoes, American Eagle Outfitters, Burlington Coat Factory. So all of a sudden, one of the clients was like, man, this actually makes sense. I had a hypothesis that they were coming into our stores, showrooming and looking at the latest fashions, and actually buying elsewhere. So for them, they had to actually make a decision, and they're still talking about it. Do we actually compete on price, or do we just say, we can't beat this? This is the way the market is, so we're going to have to live with it. Showrooming. So from a showrooming standpoint, we actually went out to our panelists, asked them the question, do you shop at Amazon.com? Then we asked the next question, have you ever done this activity called showrooming, which is going into a physical store, scanning a product, and then buying it online at a lower price? So what we found was Best Buy at a 120 index. So that means that segment of users was 20% more likely to go to a Best Buy. Makes sense. You've got Target on the list at 115. They started to do price matching. But what's interesting on this list is at the top of the list, you've got Bed Bath & Beyond at 127, PetSmart, Toys R Us. So what this is highlighting is that these are retailers that are at risk. Maybe they're not being impacted by showrooming today, but they've got an opportunity now to actually get in front of that. How do I actually prevent Amazon from going out and saying, we will price match things in the Bed Bath & Beyond category or the PetSmart category or the toys category? And then as you start to dive into the data, it's not just about an overall audience. You want to segment that out. So when you look at men versus women, you see a significant separation. So people who go to Best Buy, 39% more likely even when they're men, than a showrooming segment. 124 for Home Depot, 123 for Lowe's. Females, completely different list. Now you've got Kohl's, PetSmart, Bed Bath & Beyond, Marshalls. So it shows you by using this data, you can actually tackle the problem against an individual segment. So Best Buy's problem is not female showroomers today, it's male showroomers. And then retail and apps. So there's a lot of companies that look at app data. We have the ability to look at app data as well. So we look at people who actually went to a physical Walmart and actually had the Walmart app installed. So this is one of these key metrics where you have a lot of companies starting to invest in, we need to get app downloads, we need people to start to use this mobile experience. But what's the value? You actually don't get much value in terms of in-app purchases in a lot of instances. People just aren't ready. Some people will do it, but not the whole population. A lot of them will look at the price, go into the store, maybe make a purchase. So what you're seeing here is it's saying 8% of people who go to Walmart that have an Android device also have the Walmart app. And that increases the likelihood that they're going into the store by 51%. So again, this isn't necessarily causation, it's more correlation, that if I combine these two things together, they're more likely to go into the store. And then you see Target at the bottom. But then if I want to compare from a competitive intelligence standpoint to actually understand, am I doing better or worse as a retailer if I'm Target compared to Walmart? It's 286 right there for Target. So all of a sudden now, my audience, if I can actually get someone to install an application at Target, they're 3 times more likely to go to a Target than the US population. So all of a sudden, it puts this quantifiable value at the end of the day in terms of why should I get someone to install an app. And then you see they actually have the Walmart app installed as well. So there's some cross-population there. And then we can also go in. A lot of companies ask questions, what did you buy? We do the same thing, but we actually are able to go in and say, what places are you going to? So this is, again, taking that segmentation of what did you buy, or sorry, where did you go, taking that audience, and then actually asking them the question, what did you buy, and then seeing the differences. Because if you go to Walmart, there's a lot of different categories people go to when they go shop at Walmart versus a Costco. So you can start to segment those audiences out. This one was interesting. So we did a QSR report. We actually quantified where people went in the physical world for quick serve restaurants. So what you're looking at here is demographic breakouts, too small to see. But the most interesting thing out of this was ethnicity. So we actually went in and found that pretty much all the ethnicities indexed right around 100 for fast food, for these top 4 fast food restaurants, except for Asians. So Asians actually indexed 83 for McDonald's, 86 for Burger King, 54 for Wendy's, and 68 for Taco Bell. So if you have this information, it highlights there's a significant opportunity here to actually go after the Asian market, because that's an audience that's being ignored today. And there's a huge upside in terms of they aren't going as compared to the other population groups there. And then retail site selection, we can actually physically see where people go. So we actually have a number of use cases, and there's other companies like Esri that do this as well. But we look at our panel set, we say, if you've been to a Walmart, if you are a female with children in a household, where do you go in the physical world? We overlay store locations on top of that, and then you can find natural pockets where you don't have a store today. So it's kind of simplifying the actual retail site selection process. And then last 2 examples, this is Domino's. So this is not Domino's locations, but of people where people go to Domino's, this is where else they go in the physical world. And this is Panera. So you can see there's quite a difference in terms of how people just go into a single place visually consume the physical world. And then last one here, this is people that actually, so the blue represents, this is Manhattan, blue represents Whole Foods. So people who go to Whole Foods, they're more likely to visit businesses in that area, versus green represents Target and red represents Dollar Tree. So you can see there's a definite divide just in terms of where you go into the physical world. And we had someone actually use this data. This wasn't intended, but they used this data to actually build a media plan, and they didn't tell us. And we're like, all right, it's a good use case. And we found that the click-through rates actually matched up with a geofence campaign, but on a conversion rate basis, it was I can't say the name, but it was a quick-serve restaurant that served desserts. And what they found was 25% higher conversion rates, so click to download a coupon, and it expanded out the inventory that they were able to target to by 23%. Because they were actually able to go in, they had this audience profile in mind where they said, this is my target audience. They're healthy eaters, they want to go for a healthy snack and a dessert, and that's the only areas that we want to be able to target. We actually show them they go to Chinese restaurants, they go to 24-hour fitness and work out, they also go to Trader Joe's. So we actually show that data set, and they're like, oh, okay, this makes sense. They geofenced those, and they were able to see lift. And that's it. Thanks.
Okay, well, I had to switch my technology to this because the tablet wasn't working properly. So I guess I do like mobile after all. Question is, what is the global distribution of the Place.com panel and analysis categorizations?
So the 100,000 is U.S. only. So we actually see about 20% more traffic that occurs internationally, but our primary focus is U.S.
Okay. Anybody else? Real live question? She's getting to you over there.
Hi, I'm Cindy from Energizer. So we have a few lines of businesses where we're always trying to find out what are other locations that consumers would be better served within the store. Mm-hmm. So, other than the actual aisle where you would find that product, where else can we place it? Do you have clients who work with you to get that understanding?
Yeah, so we work with a number of CPGs today. where they go in and we take a subset of people that went to a specific location. Then we see where else they go. But then we can push a question to those same group of users or same group of panelists and say, hey, did you buy ice cream? Did you buy batteries? And where else did they go in the physical world? And you start to see some interesting variations. And then you could slice that by Hispanics versus Asians versus Caucasians versus children in household and see how those groups differ.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you, David.
Cool, thank you.
Fascinating.